That's my why. That's why I wake up every day, is because I don't think that we should, as a society, as advanced as we are in medicine, we shouldn't have people choosing between debt and death. They should always be choosing life.
Honestly, whoever in the room looks a little nervous or shy, they're probably the one you want to talk to.
Once they got approval, the industry went, it exploded.
When you're picking a co-founder, you really have to work well together.
We're starting off the year trying to just get our word out there. And that's part of why we're here today, too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene, and welcome to Oceanside Perspective's new series, Purpose, Why Medicine, where I speak to professionals who have found their purpose and want to share their unique journey, experiences, and learnings with our audience. I'm here today with Dennis White, or DJ, CEO and co-founder at Cytodyme, and Tammy Ogden, Chief Business Officer and co-founder at Cytodyme, a company building a pioneering software that aims to streamline and accelerate the cell or gene therapy development process to decrease the costs of these life-saving therapies. DJ and Tammy, thank you for taking the time to have this conversation with me today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here.
Awesome. So I've provided a very broad overview of what your current roles are, and now we want to hear from you about your journey to entrepreneurship. So could you briefly introduce your background and how you got to where you are today? Starting with you, Tammy.
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. It took me a while to figure out my path. I think DJ has a bit more of a streamlined story. In high school, I thought I was going to be an artist. So that was my path getting into undergrad. I thought I was going to be a painter. I studied abroad my sophomore year and then realized that probably wasn't the best route for me. So I had to pivot and majored in communications, which I think is honestly kind of common for those who are switching it up halfway through their undergrad. And then I tried a bunch of different things. I went into marketing. For a while, I was a teacher in Thailand. And then I really found my stride while working for a Silicon Valley-based startup. I was on the founding team, and I focused on customer relations, customer success, and really found that my fit is best when serving people and working directly with them. And then the MBA at Rady is kind of where all of this really, landed and has started to progress.
Yeah, that's awesome. DJ?
Yeah, so, my background, I started off in high school wanting to be Indiana Jones. Yeah, so, I was very passionate about history. I was very passionate about the social sciences, but then my dad passed away to metastasized cancer when I was a freshman in high school, and that kind of intrinsically shifted my life in a different direction. So I knew that I wanted to be a force for change for the better when it comes to cancer. And I thought it was obviously unfair for a high schooler to be saying goodbye to his dad. But I also think that there's so many other people with similar experiences, and maybe not in high school, but maybe later on in life or earlier in life even. So I kind of made it my goal to change that in the future, and ended up completely pivoting interests to things like biochemistry. Went to UCLA, got my degree in biochemistry, then progressed into the biotech sector. I got my feet wet in a couple of very successful biotechs in the cell and gene therapy space, which at the time I had no clue what that even was, and I got addicted to it, and more so passionate about the change that it was making in patients' lives. So all of that kind of culminated to a point where I said I want to lead in the industry. I don't want to just be trying to research and find the next best thing. There's actually significantly more intelligent people out there than myself who are way more capable at doing that. But I wanted to guide those people and create positive change in the industry. So I came back to get my MBA, and that's where I met my co-founder Tammy. We're both students currently actually getting our MBAs at UCSDs Rady School of Management. So that's where we're at now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear about your dad. Cancer is really something that is so pervasive these days. I actually recently had a family member pass away from cancer as well. So
And that's kind of the thing, like with cancer, it touches almost every person's life in one way, shape, or form at some point. So it's been really refreshing is probably the wrong word to utilize here, but being someone now who's developing a solution to help better cancer therapies make it to patients faster, what I've realized is how many of those connections there really are, and it's so much easier to start a conversation with a connection like that, where people understand the level of hurt and suffering that their loved ones or their friends or their family have gone through, and why it's so important to be coming up with solutions like what we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So a central theme for this podcast is purpose, or the why behind what you do. So what is your why, if you could summarize it into one sentence? Tammy?
Yeah, I think jumping off of that, I want to be a part of something that helps people and that is meaningful. And so I think the mission behind Cytodyme is just that. And it's really important work. It gives me a reason to wake up and feel like I'm doing something that makes the world a better place and has impact, especially on our most vulnerable population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. DJ?
It's virtually impossible for me to wake up and not be thinking about the problems that exist around this space, and it's hard for me to summarize in a why, so I'm just going to take some executive liberty here. But for me, when my dad was going through his treatment, his doctor gave him two choices. He said, you have your standard of care, or you have a more advanced care that's not covered by your insurance. The type of therapy that he was going to be getting was one that we're talking a couple of months of extension if it was the standard, and the more advanced one that his insurance wasn't going to cover, maybe an extra year, maybe two, if the stars aligned on that. And it was effectively a choice for him between debt and death. It's not something that any parent should have to consider. It's not a choice that really anyone should have to consider, in my opinion. And that's my why. That's why I wake up every day, is because I don't think that we should, as a society, as advanced as we are in medicine, we shouldn't have people choosing between debt and death. They should always be choosing life. And it's my belief that it's not a choice, it's a given. And that's why I wake up every day and do what I do.
Yeah, that was beautifully put. Thank you for sharing. So Tammy, you have a wide range of different experiences, as you mentioned, from marketing to teaching English in Thailand to hosting an educational series about blockchain technology. So how has your breadth of experiences influenced you as a leader?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I think the cool thing about trying so many different things is that you have a little bit of experience in everything, and it gives you a well-versed background to bring something to the table. And I think as a leader, lately my theme has just been efficiency. Like I feel like it's really good to mull over a problem, get into the weeds, but at the end of the day, like making a decision, pointing to the next step, and getting to the next, milestone is a really important skill to have. And I think our working style complements each other in that, where DJ is such a big vision thinker, and I think I'm good at pacing us. All right, let's make that choice.
One thing that she's not saying about herself too is, with all of the experiences that she has, just with travel and the different hats that she's worn, I have yet to find a room with a single person in that room that Tammy hasn't found a way to connect with them in some way, because she has so many different experiences in her own life. It's very difficult for her to not be able to connect with people. And that was actually something that was important for me when I was looking for a co-founder for Cytodyme, was how do we have that? How do we build connections with people that I might not have the same similar experiences with? And how do we connect with people at that level too?
Yes, especially important for a chief business officer.
Yeah.
Yes. Very well suited for the role. So DJ, you have a background in biochem and research. How do those experiences inform your perspective today?
Yeah, so I've spent the last decade actually working in the cell and gene therapy space. So my first job, I was really, really fortunate. I was employee number 75-ish at a company called Kite Pharmaceuticals. They were one of the first companies kind of pioneering the space when it comes to a cell or gene-based therapy. And they were also one of the first to get an approval from the FDA for that. And that was kind of what launched my career in this direction. And the interesting thing with these types of therapies, just to give clarity for those listening as well, is a patient that would have had an 8% chance of survival before receiving one of these therapies, after receiving this therapy, they're getting an 85% chance of surviving over a 3-month period. It's like a standard industry metric, 3-month survival rate. And those metrics are huge. We're talking about people today, someone our age graduating college, someone having a family of their own, when 10 years ago they were saying goodbye to their parents. They were saying goodbye to their loved ones, their friends. And that's a true impact, right? So starting my experience at that point and then moving throughout the industry, I got hooked on this particular area, this immuno-oncology space, with specifically cell and gene therapies, because I saw the impact firsthand. And that's really where it's informed a lot of my decision making going forward. I don't see the point in wasting as much time on things where we're using the old standards of care, like, can I kill the cancer faster than I kill you? That seems like such an archaic, like caveman-esque style. There's a lot of important science there, but it's just we're past that point. And there's this new bleeding edge of science that exists where, it's not even, we're past the cutting edge. We're now at the receiving end, the bleeding edge of it. And it's very exciting work that's being done, and that's kind of where my biotech has been shifted onto its head, or biochemistry is what I specialized in as an undergrad, and now would consider myself more of an immunologist than a biochemist in that by how that worked.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. So both of you are getting your MBAs right now at Rady at UCSD. How has that experience influenced the perspective and the way that you run your business now?
Oh man, I think it's been everything. For me, especially just being able to apply what you're learning in class directly to your business as you're building it is pretty amazing. And I think that the network that we have just through the university alone has been so helpful and so powerful. Being able to just take a professor out to lunch and have the opportunity to pick their brain and get advice just because you're their student is just such a great tool and opportunity.
And it's also, these aren't just professors at some no-name university that have nothing to back themselves up with their credibility. These are people who have real-world experience. We took a professor out to lunch to pick his brain on some things.
Shout out Michael Berthelot.
Yeah, and with Michael, he is the lead chairman of the board for Del Monte, which is a fruit company. And he has a lot of interesting perspectives for people who are coming into roles where we have to talk about how does a board meeting work and how do these types of relationships go. We had the opportunity to take Cytodyme through classes at UCSD and utilize. We're not developing something just for the sake of a class. We're actually developing the thing and getting real-time feedback from people who this is their life. It's been their life for longer than we've been alive, and getting that real-time feedback and firsthand knowledge. And like Tammy said, the resources that we have available to us, even initially when we were trying to do initial customer research and try and find a product market fit, having the powerful .edu email address opens so many different doors that as an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur trying to establish something, it's a completely different level of credibility because they see that ucsd.edu and they want to talk to you, as opposed to if they just see at cytodyme.com, they're like, I don't know who that is. I don't know what this is. I'm not going to reply back to it. So there's a lot of benefits that we've actually had just by joining the program. And then there's an army of people that stand behind us at any point in time, giving us real-time feedback, helping us, reminding us that there's grant applications available for us to apply to, and just anywhere that support can come from. So it's really a great environment that we have at UCSD specifically for a lot of this, and it's been really, I couldn't see doing this without that support system as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to summarize that, so UCSD and the MBA program has allowed some credibility, gave you some credibility in terms of the EDU, and access to many resources, whether that's people or opportunities or grants and things like that.
Yeah. Or even potential interns in the future, too.
The San Diego area specifically, it's really great for biotech.
Yes.
Specifically.
We're in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
Strategic
Yes.
placement. Yeah.
Not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
So you both are very involved in the UCSD community. For example, Tammy, you are president of the Women of Rady Club and VP of the Venture Capital Club, and DJ, you're president of the Tech Club and Rady Life Sciences Club. Why is being involved in giving back to the UCSD community important to you?
I mean, it's how we met.
It is, yeah.
It's kind of our origin story in that we both, day one, I'm just going to tell our story at this point, but day one, we had our orientation meeting for the MBA program, and Tim Schwartz from the Sullivan Center of Entrepreneurship came in and said, victory goes to those who show up. And we took that to heart and ended up in all of these leadership positions because of it, because we, went to every opportunity that was available to us and eventually met all the people we needed to meet and have somehow found ourselves in leadership positions. And through that, really met each other in the process and learned our working styles and, founded a company from it.
Yeah. I think Tammy and I were actually talking about this the other day. One of the things that we look for in advisors ourselves are the people that we trust the most are the people who are trying to give back to their communities. And one of the things that Tammy was saying is we just need to find people who are us, but like 10 years in the future. That's the type of people that we want to find. So part of that being that type of person is doing what we're doing right now too, right? So by giving back to the institution in whatever way we can through programming amazing events that, the Tech Club, the Women of Rady, the Life Science Club, the VC Club, all these things are great opportunities for us as in leadership roles to have a broader outreach, both as our own, individual brands, but also we're building these connections that we can carry over to things like Cytodyme, for example. Now, when it comes to just the sheer, altruism of it as well, I think, at least speaking for myself, I deeply enjoy getting to talk to people and advise them. And whether or not they take my advice, I'm not offended, but getting the opportunity to meet others, it also enriches my own life and experiences too by seeing those different perspectives. So.
Yeah. It sounds cheesy, but you get so much more through giving. You really do.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a little bit about Tammy, like you being able to build these relationships with people. What advice do you have for networking and building these relationships?
Oh man, I think going in knowing everyone is a little uncomfortable and just being willing to talk to, honestly, whoever in the room looks a little nervous or shy. They're probably the one you want to talk to. They're probably brilliant and have a lot to say. But also, just making sure that when you are networking, you're taking advantage of that opportunity, following up, making note of what they're saying so that when you see them again, you have a touch point to build off of. I think one of the cool things for us is that we've really started to dig into like the San Diego founder community, and we've gone to so many events now that now we know if we're going to an event, we're going to know at least 10 to 15 people in the room already. And so it's a comfortable space to be in now, whereas before it was, a little daunting to be the new kids on the block. So yeah, just showing up and listening and then building from there.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of the networking aspect as well, because when you just show up to something multiple times, you're talking to people, there's a particular individual that I really want to get connected to, right? I could do a couple of different options. I could walk up, introduce myself, and he could forget me the next day. I could make myself useful. I can show up to his event. I can help out at the event, maybe even. I can, do a bunch of other things around it and do that several times to the point where then that connection actually feels natural. And one of the things that I've found is people start recognizing you, and once you get that level of recognition, now walking up and saying, "Hey, how have you been?" isn't like I'm awkwardly going to start a conversation with you kind of thing. It's, "Hey, I've seen you at this event, this event, and that event. How have you been since the last event that I saw you at?" And they know you because they've seen you all of those times. I do think that having that more organic style of connection is important. And that's really how I do my networking is, there are people who I want to get connected to, but I almost refuse to send that like LinkedIn connection request. I've made it my goal for a couple of people to have them connection request me to feel comfortable enough, and I've made myself, put myself in a situation in their life where they want to be connected to me instead. And it's those kinds of connections that I think provide not only the most value for the person doing the networking, but also for the people that are being connected. And having those true connections are way more important than the next random person that you'll never talk to on LinkedIn again. So
Yeah, in person, it's important.
It's very important.
LinkedIn is a sieve. Your mailbox can fill up really quickly with a lot of just, like sales pitches and things. And so, I think in person is the way to go. And people are craving it now.
But then again, I've had some really cool connections that I've made from just some random person.
That is true.
Who has reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, cool hair. Let's meet up and get coffee and talk about what you're doing." And I'm like, "Thank you. Yeah, let's meet." And then we meet up, and then that one thing leads to the next, Those conversations are a lot fewer and far between, but it doesn't, I don't want to bash people's networking styles too much, but showing up is very important, I think. And Tim was absolutely right that victory goes to those who show up.
So showing up is that first step, but then you need to do something about it.
Yeah, the follow-on is really important.
Yeah, great advice. So let's talk a little bit about Cytodyme. Who came up with the name, and what is the story behind it?
All right. So, Cytodyme, where did it come from? Well, we had a bunch of, what was the fun names that I came up with before? So, Immunomachina was one, and Tammy, I shared that to Tammy, and I was like, "Tammy, what about her partner, Dave, he was over, and we were talking about it, and I was like, I want something, impactful." And I said, all these people, they keep on coming up with, you have Palantir, you have Anduriel, you have all of these Lord of the Rings. There's Valinor Therapeutics out there, believe it or not. And so I was, I'm a really big nerd, and I love Lord of the Rings. I think it's probably one of the best literary works out of the 20th century, probably ever. And that's how nerdy I am. I'm literally going through the extended director's edition right now, just because. But I wanted to have some kind of aspect in there, but then something that people are like, "Ooh, that sounds cool." And yeah, I told Tammy Immunomachina, and she was like, "DJ, that's a great idea. Don't do it." But we ended up going around a couple of times, and then there was one day I was like, "What is the name of that company, or what is the name of that company that made Skynet in Terminator?" And I sat and thought, I was like, that's Cyberdyne. And I said, what if I called our company Cytodyme? And instead of Skynet, we have a platform that's called CellNet instead. And then I kept going and I said, okay, yeah, this sounds like it's cool enough and it has a cool enough ring to it. And then when you look at it, it looks okay. And, you know, that's literally where it came from, is how do we make this a nerdy name that also sounds cool and conveys what we're doing. And the name in and of itself, Cyto has to do with cells, which is part of what we're trying to change how we manufacture those cells and get them to patients for their therapies. But then the other half of it, DYME, is the absolute wrong way to spell the second half of paradigm. So the goal here was we're trying to change the cell and gene therapy paradigm. Cytodyne. Really long word,
Yeah.
just salad of why we're named the way that we are, but that was kind of the thought.
We're
behind
nerds
it.
at heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. So what startup stage is Cytodyme at?
Great question.
Yeah.
Ideation.
Yeah.
We are still in the ideating phase, but
We're
actively
edging,
pushing forward. Yes.
to prototyping. We're pretty close to prototyping. In fact, we have been having a couple of really great conversations with some early stage like partnerships that we might be able to develop to kind of jumpstart a lot of our prototyping. But yeah, we're probably in the next month going to be starting our prototyping for our CellNet product. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So why are you guys the team best fit to bring Cytodyme to market?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. I mean, DJ here, experience-wise, just killing it. But I think it goes beyond that. I think when you're picking a co-founder, you really have to work well together. You really need to understand how to communicate in a way that, you know, pushes the ball forward. Conflicts are never really a conflict with us. It's more a discussion. And I'll give credit to DJ. I think I said it before when we first met, but he never tries to prove someone wrong. It's always trying to prove them right to figure out where their head's at. And that has been sort of, I don't know, our thesis in our working relationship is just, yeah, and the commitment that we have to this. I think it's scary to find a co-founder and have a little doubt that they might not be in it for the long haul. And I think there isn't a doubt here that we're both in it. We're gonna try this and push it as far as we can. So
Yeah, I think, you know, right team for the right job. Tammy has a background with B2B SaaS. She worked at a company called SageTap. It was a startup. She was one of the founding employees there, worked on customer success, and she also has a deep connection by the nature of what that company and their product was, a connection with a lot of technical experts in the field, which we've actually been utilizing some of those for our work at Cytodyme. And then, you know, my background, 10 years of experience in the industry. I would like to say it was 10 years that I wasn't frustrated at all. But it was really 10 years that I spent saying, man, why does this suck so much? And someone's got to be working on it. And then Kite got acquired by Gilead, and I was like, I'm going to go do the next big thing at Immunity Bio. And when I got there, I said, wow, this really sucks still. Like, why has no one made the solution? And then I did that, and no solution was made all of these different times. And it was frustrating because when you see a problem and it's so apparent to you, and you've gotten to wear all of these different hats over 10 years, and you're like, wow, why doesn't this would just fit right here? It's like the Lego pieces are fitting for me. Why is no one else seeing this? And eventually I just got so peeved by it. It's like, okay, cool. We're going to go get an MBA and we're going to try and solve the problem. And that's where we're at now. So why we're a good fit, when you have software as a service, you are making the product directly for the customer, and everything about that customer's success is our success. If they're successful, we succeed. And when I was thinking of bringing Tammy on as a co-founder, my thoughts were exactly that. I mean, she can't not connect with someone. Like she's not capable of doing it. She'll find some way to connect with someone at some point in time. And even if she doesn't have that connection, she finds the way to start building that. So that's the kind of person that you need when you're building out a platform that's for people to use your product, rather than what I see a lot of companies in this space, in biotech in general. You like, for the therapies, it's just, this is the indication. This is the thing that we're working for. Clearly you have product market fit if the therapy works. That's your product market fit. We're different in the biotech space because we're actually servicing all of the companies that revolve around bringing that therapy to a patient. So we need to have that connection. And between her experience with building connections like that and making sure that customers succeed, and then my experience in literally grinding my face against a chalkboard for 10 years, wondering why all of these problems aren't solved with a simple, clear-cut solution, is why we're the best fit.
Yeah, you guys make a great team.
Thanks.
So to provide some context around the topics that we'll be discussing today, could you provide an overview of the history of cell or gene therapy?
Yeah. So cell and gene therapy started actually a lot earlier in 1980s, probably even earlier than that. And there was a big push at some point in time, before the 2000s, where they wanted to do cell therapies in patients, and they tried to do it, and some patients died. So it didn't work out the way that they wanted to, and because of the costs that were associated with making these types of therapies, the industry as a whole kind of backpedaled and said, I mean, the data might look great, but if there's no way to make money on it, and we risk literally going bankrupt because all it takes is one patient suffering from a bad side effect of our therapy. So the industry as a whole kind of stepped away from it. Then it kind of lay dormant. Immunologists kind of pivoted towards monoclonal antibodies and developing solutions around that. That whole type of treatment modality is you just take antibodies, so the things that identify like an illness or a virus or a bacteria or something like that, and it will stick to it and then call your immune system to go and attack it and destroy it or whatever that particular response would be. So they focused a lot on awakening the immune system by basically arming a warhead and putting the laser dot on the target, and then the patient would come and treat that. The problem was that there were some cancers that didn't have good treatments, and the reason for that in part was because the particular cells that were being the most affected by the cancer, where the cancer was, were immune cells, B cells. And that's where non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was having, there was a really huge gap in the space because you had these B cells, which were cells that go in the blood. They're a type of white blood cell, an immune cell. And you couldn't treat them with anything other than basically just zapping the patient with a bunch of radiation, maybe doing like a bone marrow transplant and hoping for the best. Most of these patients had very low survival rates. Like I said, 8% was their chance of surviving 3 months at the point that we would treat them. So that's where cell and gene therapies came back in and experienced a resurgence. So it was really in treating a lot of these blood or liquid-based cancers. And Kite's particular treatment was, I believe, going after DLBCL and ALL, which they're just different indications of. I won't get that deep, but they're indications for patients with a type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And once they got approval, the industry went just it exploded because we found out we got the price down for manufacturing these things enough. But then also insurance companies and providers were getting more accepting of higher pricing for types of things. So unfortunately, some of these therapies still aren't covered in like the EU insurance infrastructure because they cost too much. For context, we're talking like $350,000 to $500,000 average. $500,000 is a lot of money. There's one gene therapy that I think was like $2 or $5 million. It was recently approved by the FDA. I mean, it's a one-time treatment. It fixes your genome in some way, shape, or form. So they're durable solutions, but that's a lot of money. And the industry as a whole is now kind of emerging because there's money available for development, because there's been some success. Now companies are trying to find ways to reduce those costs. And that's really where the industry is right now. You have a lot of drives, especially with the advent of AI and machine learning and applications of that AI to hardware to develop kind of more streamlined automated solutions. But there's still no pathway to get to that point. And a lot of the technology that is being used is the same. If you boil it down to its most intrinsic level, it's pretty much the same technology that was being used in the 80s or the 90s. It's just there's computers attached to it as opposed to analog dials. We're not innovating. And there's a new advent kind of companies that are trying to build out this space more and level it up to the 21st century like it really should be. But there's still a lot of space to innovate in.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned immunotherapy is different from cell or gene therapy.
I would say a cell or gene therapy, you have immunotherapy, and then you have cell or gene therapies as a subset of it. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So what is the current standard of care, and how does it differ from the cell or gene therapy?
So for that therapy, like Yescarta, for example, that originally was approved for, I think, a fourth-line treatment. So there's 3 other lines of treatment that a patient is going to go through before they get to that point of treatment. So standard of care, you probably get, and I'm not a medical professional, so take everything I'm saying literally with the biggest grain of salt, but you would typically be getting something like a radiotherapy or chemotherapy as the first and second line, as kind of just a boom, let's try and hit it and see what we get. And then you'd progress more into the second or third line treatments, which are like the monoclonal antibodies that I mentioned. And then past that point, at 10 years ago, for types of cancers like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a doctor would be like, I don't have anything else. There's nothing left in my tool bucket to try and solve this problem. So then they try and start doing other types of medicine all in the same space and hope for the best. Then you get to your like fourth line treatments. I do think that for like Yescarta, they've gotten approvals to go into earlier lines of treatment with the idea eventually of trying to get to a first line treatment. First line treatment is really hard though, because that's the burden to like an insurance company, for an example. If everyone is receiving a $500,000 therapy and there's 14,000 cases a year, that's, I mean, I'm sure the biotech company would love that paycheck, but that's just not, it's not even with the current capacity of manufacturing these, because they're all individualized therapies. This is something that, you're taking your blood, modifying it, and giving it back directly to you. There's not even we don't have enough facilities to treat. The current demand for non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, like 42,000 cases a year. If it was a first-line treatment, then you'd have to be providing 42,000. I think Kite has 3 global manufacturing facilities, maybe 4, and their capacity's just shy of 20,000. That's 50% short of the global demand. So there's also an issue there too, with that. But that's kind of the current standard of care as I kind of understand it from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. So if we compare cell and gene therapy to chemotherapy is kind of like you're killing everything that's fast growing, all the cells that are fast growing in the body, if I understand correctly. Mm-hmm. Cell or gene therapy, is it just, for gene therapy, I think it's kind of intuitive that you're changing some aspect of the genome. What about cell therapy? So
for that particular type of therapy, you do have a gene modification that is going on in those cells in particular. So you can have a therapy like that where you are actively modifying the genome of a certain type of cells. There's a new line of therapies that are coming in the future, which will probably try and change the genes in the patient themselves, maybe in a select type of cell or just ubiquitous across the body, and use the cells in the patient to kind of do that. So when you have a chemotherapy, yes, the general modality here is kill everything that grows fast. There are some things that need to grow fast, like blood, for example. Your blood cells are refreshing, every week, 2 weeks, something like that. So you need to be able to refresh those. So killing them isn't going to be that bad. Hopefully your bone marrow can replenish in the right amount of time. But cell and gene therapy, where you're taking a chimeric antigen T cell, you're arming it with a particular, you can think of it like a warhead. So you give it the targeting system, and then it goes and does what its biology has told it to do for centuries now. So in the case of a cancer, you put the targeting system, you give it a target lock on a cancer cell, and then it says, target confirmed, and it goes in and, does whatever it needs to do to kill that cell, right? So that's the difference, is you have the kind of carpet bombing technique of just destroy everything and hope that we don't kill the patient before we kill the cancer. And then you have the other approach, which is a more elegant approach. And it does less damage in a lot of ways. And that's actually one of the true benefits of these types of therapies is, with the cancer therapy, that you have a chemo or radiation, what when you see that patient walking around, right? You see, they get really skinny, they can't eat as much, they lose their hair, they look unhealthy because they are. When you have a T-cell therapy like this, there's a lot different kind of response. And that's, I think, one of the true powers of this therapy as well, is the patients who are receiving it aren't feeling like they're dying when they receive these types of therapies, or at least not as much as just getting zapped by a glint of radiation, right? So.
It just feels like the more humane way to be doing this.
Yeah. Improves outlook. I mean, being someone who's seen a parent kind of go through it and not make it, every patient gets to a point where they're just like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm just tired and I'm done. And could you imagine being a human who you've been placed on this earth to live, and to sit there and give up on that, and that's one of the last thoughts that person has before they perish? That's kind of a cruel thing to put people through. So that's also one of the appeals to these new types of therapies, is you're not sitting there and just punching everything. You're going in with a scalpel, and you're doing this eloquent procedure to try and treat a patient.
Mm-hmm. So that's why it's also a subset of the targeted therapy.
Yeah.
And the personalization of medicine.
Yes.
So we're going towards that direction, which is
that's the hope and the dream.
Yeah. So we're getting into the process of developing these therapies. Why are these therapies so expensive in the first place? You mentioned that one gene therapy was $2 million for one session. Mm-hmm. Why are they so expensive?
Yeah. Great question. So there's really three, what I've observed, the way that I like to explain it is there's kind of three main cost drivers for a type of therapy in the space of cell and gene therapy, and that's the plants. I like to do things with easy to remember ways. So there's the 3 Ps. You have plants, people, and process. So the plant is the manufacturing facility. On average, these facilities can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, typically at least $100 million. If you're a startup who has this great idea, you have this really great IP around this particular cell and gene therapy, no investor's going to look at you seriously if you're I'm looking for a $150 million seed round so that I can go and build a building to make my therapy. They're going to look at you and they're going to say, why? You don't even know if it works yet. You're asking me to drop $100 million and you do all this capital expense for something that may or may not work. The second one is the people. So these are personalized therapies, and much like the reason why these plants cost so much money is because every patient that you want to treat in a given year, you have to do the math and back calculate, because you can't share hoods. You can't be manufacturing these types of therapies at the same time in the same space, because what happens if you accidentally mix, your blood with Tammy's blood? That's bad, very bad, and that's how you get your whole operation closed by the FDA. And that doesn't even count for the fact that if this makes it to a patient, that's going to be it. It's really hard to recover from that. So you have to have this degree of separation, which then means everyone is only doing one thing for one patient. You have one manufacturing space for that patient, and this stacks. It stacks a lot. So the people that are doing this, they range in skill levels. You can have an operating technician who has a GED at this point because we've refined the process so well. But then you have so many other there's so many team members that are highly skilled, highly sought after, and have really high salaries as well that go into each and every single one. So then that's cost driver number 2, people. Then cost driver number 3 is the process. So when you're developing this, because of cost driver 1 and 2, you have this need to outsource things. So 65% of companies, it's probably more now, choose to outsource their manufacturing and development to what are called CDMOs, or contract development manufacturing organizations. And these particular organizations are really, CEOs at high biotech companies like Bayer have gone out and said, picking a particular CDMO is like picking a partner in marriage. You're hitching your wagon to them, and if they lead you off a cliff, guess what? You're going off the cliff too. So really what that whole relationship looks like is the reason why you're doing it is because you don't have to buy the plant, you don't have to buy the facility, the $100 million, and you don't have to buy the people. You're not, if your process doesn't work, that's not 150 FTE, employees. Those are people with families that aren't going to get a salary, right? So you de-risk all of those things. The result then is a process where you have to outsource everything to other people, other organizations, to help de-risk that. The industry has done that for 80 years, probably more, in one way, shape, or form. And nobody's thought, okay, well, yeah, you're offering value proposition A, you're offering value proposition B, and everyone's doing different things in the space. So then as a biotech company who has a novel therapy, they have to navigate all of this. The solution that we're coming up with is just a streamlined approach from point A to point B. All you have to do is use our platform, and as you grow and develop and you have new needs for your company, which obviously we're informed on what those needs are, you just add on the next module, you add on the next thing, and it connects all of those things together. So yeah, we're a SaaS platform. We are a connection tool that helps connect these value providers to biotech companies and vice versa. But at the end of the day, what we like to think of ourselves as is an instant integration expert. So all of these things are integrated in one path. And as long as you follow that path, you're probably going to be, as long as your science is good, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. Mm-hmm. At least that's what we hope.
With the bigger goal of streamlining these processes, reducing costs and time, and then getting these therapies to patients a lot faster. So
Yeah.
And
the
then
high-level vision.
Yeah, and there's less costs for the patients
Yes.
that way as well.
You can
Exactly.
pass that down to those who need it.
Yeah.
So what does that process look like, and why is it so complicated?
Yeah, so it is a complicated process, right? So, just getting a contract between a biotech and a CDMO, right? You're going to engage your legal teams. You're going to engage your subject matter experts. You're going to engage their subject matter experts. You're going to engage your management teams and everyone involved. And there have literally been, I've witnessed this, either through friends, associates, or even in my own experience, where you get 80% of the way there, and then someone says, well, what about that thing? And then everyone stops and they say, oh, yeah, that's not going to work. And then the whole thing falls through. And other times you'll go through the entire process. You've signed contracts now, and you find out 2 months down the line, oh, you weren't being truthful with me when you said that you knew how to do it. You actually don't know how to do it, but you just knew that I was going to give you enough money for you to learn how to do it while you're working on my thing. Like, nobody wants to be the test dummy, right? So kind of the way that I try and describe it is, imagine if you were going to go buy a car and you went to the dealership, and I have a Jeep Wrangler. So let's say it's a Jeep Wrangler dealership, and you go there and I'm like, I want to test drive a new car because my old Wrangler is a bucket of bolts. And they say, cool, that'll be $5,000 to test drive our car. I say, well, I like Jeep Wranglers and I want to test drive the car because I don't want to drive it without first experiencing it. So yeah, here's the $5,000. Test drive it, say, cool. I'm at least a studious person, so I'm not going to just say, okay, cool, thank you for giving me that one option. I'm not going to try anything else ever again. I'm just going to make the purchase. And then they come back to me and they say, okay, great. Yeah, you can come back whenever you want. And if you do buy the car through us, we'll apply that $5,000 to the purchase. But if you don't buy the car through us, we're keeping the $5,000. That's the sunk costs that are going into the decision-making process for biotech companies and CDMOs, just as like a single example. So you're spending all this time, and that's the more important thing, and money, and you only have so much runway as a startup. You only have so much runway. Even if you're an established company, your budget is your budget. And getting even in a large pharmaceutical, like enterprise level company, getting your budget approved to go a little bit higher, you're going to be upsetting a lot of people. So the whole thing here is those timelines and all of those things that are going into it cost money. And the wastefulness that goes into it, that's where the costs in the process come from. Is this isn't just the dealership that we're talking about. We're talking about the guy that puts the wheels on my car, the guy who cleans the car before. Every single person along this step of the process of just buying the car, they're all saying the same thing. Oh, well, for getting your window washed, maybe it's $2,500. And I'm like, well, I don't even know if I need my window washed. Well, it's $2,500 either way. So then, like, that's what I'm talking about. To try and put it in more of like an average person's perspective, that dealership, we'd put it out of business in 5 seconds. Some social media post would come out and someone would be like, these guys suck, like, and they would close immediately. They'd get no business because that business model would not work. Why are we doing that in any other industry? Like, it doesn't even seem like it should be legal in some ways, right? Because there's no competition, almost no competition by the nature of it. So what we're trying to do is introduce competition to the market, but also provide just intrinsic value to the companies that are now competing with each other by giving them customers that they otherwise wouldn't have had access to. Or they'd have to have paid a lot more for customer acquisition costs than they would by using our platform.
So Cytodyme brings value to the CDMOs as well as the innovators. Could you talk about both values?
Yeah. So our business model that we've kind of tried to develop here is one, like, some people will look at it at face value and they're like, you're making a two-front marketplace. And that's not what we're doing, though.
Connection tool.
Yeah, we're a connection tool. But the real thing, the reason why I don't even like it when people try and compare us to a marketplace is because really when you develop a marketplace, there is one person that you are selling and there is another person that's buying, right? So the person that you're selling, it's really hard to get that person onto your marketplace. It's really hard to find that, like, your assets are that person. If spontaneously someone decides or the industry decides that this type of solution isn't yours anymore, then once they leave, your value is zero because they are your value. That's not really a healthy way to build a company, in my opinion, where you're relying on the goodwill of someone wanting to use your platform. You should provide value for them every step of the way. And then, yeah, if you make some revenue off of connecting one person to another or one company to another company, great. But there should be value in even what you're providing them. So, when we're talking about these types of things and how our business model actually fits into that, the value that we provide to the CDMO, lower customer acquisition costs, ideally longer customer lifetime value. Customers are going to stick with them longer because their therapies are lasting longer. They need more manufacturing. Those are kind of the two real key performance metrics that CDMOs look at as well. Their profits are determined by how much they're filling their capacity fill. So if I have I can do X number of things in a year, my profitability margin is I need to get to 80% capacity. As long as I'm as a product manager or a salesperson for that company, that CDMO, as long as I'm at 80% capacity, whatever that number is, great. I've made profitability. Books are green. That's what we want to see. Customer acquisition costs are one of the highest things that CDMOs spend their money on because you have to compete with 1,000 other people that are all offering potentially the same thing. Then, in addition to that, you bring a customer on and you find out that they're not doing, or they didn't do the things that they said they were going to do, and now you have all these other development times and stuff. Those types of problems then lead into, okay, well, you're not actually manufacturing yet. So what are you going to do? And you're not at that capacity. You're not at that level. So the value that we're providing to them is a firm understanding of the types of customers that they're getting. It's also lower cost to acquire new customers. And then it's also longer value for those customers over the lifetime. Then for the biotech innovator side, what are we providing to them? We're providing them a streamlined approach to grow their startup from its very inception, where most of the work is going to be directed towards generating documentation for clinical submissions, organizing all of that stuff. Then it progresses into how do you store those things? How do you ensure that your employees are all trained on those things? How do you make sure that your documents are stored electronically? How do you then analyze the data that you have from those electronic documents back to inform the other things? These are all processes that right now they're being done manually, and you're either outsourcing it to other organizations or you're hiring your own people. These are things that can easily be automated if everything was in one place to begin with. So the value that we're offering to the innovator is really to streamline that. We can reduce their full-time employee count by not having to have as many people focused on this, so that your scientists can focus on being scientists, not focus on being clerks at a desk, because that's not what they got their PhDs for. They got their PhDs to do the research, to make the change that they were looking for in the world. So that's really where we're providing the time back to the biotech innovators. We're giving them the security to de-risk their processes even at an earlier stage. And we're allowing them to then develop these partnership relationships with like CDMOs, for example, in a competitive space now where they're not paying that $5,000 to test drive. They already know what the capabilities are, and they didn't have to spend that $5,000 just to explore whether or not it was going to work out in the first place.
So win-win-win all over.
That's what we like to see. Yeah,
Yes.
green check marks. That's our thing. Yeah.
So where does Cytodyme make money in the process?
Good question.
Yeah.
So on the connection side, it would be based off of, we would take a percentage of whatever connection we made. And then on the innovator side, there's multiple facets, but we would grow with them throughout the process of development.
Yeah, so the idea is really we scale with you. So to begin with, you don't need enterprise level features that are enabling an organization of 300 employees to all work through a phase 3 clinical trial. At the very beginning, you just finished your pre-IND work, so your novel therapy is just getting ready to be applied into the FDA's clinical trial program, and you're looking to generate all those documents. You're looking to build the partnerships. You're looking to get those contracts and reagents and equipment and everything that you need to do that process as per the regulation. So as long as you are doing those things, you're in the right place. But the whole purpose is, how do we streamline that, and how do we make that? And when we do streamline it for someone, that's where our revenue source comes from. So, hey, this part of the process, it's a subscription fee. You want to enable the next module, that's this much more. That's this much more. It grows with the company. So we're trying to really not provide more than what someone needs at the stage that they're in, and allow them to choose when they want to grow it further. Yeah.
What's next for Cytodyme?
I mean, on the horizon, we're about to go to JP Morgan. I think that
Yeah. So
we're gonna head up and continue to get Cytodyme out there. Like I said, we're in the ideation phase, but a lot of what comes into building our company is building those relationships, making sure that people know what we're putting our feet on the ground and doing, and that eventually, hopefully, will lead into our next round. So, putting the boots on the ground where a lot of the people we want to be talking to are.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Tammy said, we're planning on going to the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. That's up in San Francisco at the very beginning of 2025. So we're going to be talking to a lot of cell and gene therapy innovators up there at very early stages, at kind of the middle of their life cycle, and also who've already kind of come out the other side with successful therapies. There's going to be a lot of potential manufacturing partners that are out there as well. So really our goal is, we're starting off the year trying to just get our word out there. And that's part of why we're here today too, is to start doing that as well.
Well, that's all really exciting news.
Yeah.
And as we bring this interview to a close, I have one last question for both of you. If you could say something to your younger self, what would that be?
Oh man, yeah, I'll go first. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just buckle up. There's so much growth that goes into just figuring out who you are, what you want to be, and what you want to work on. And I've come a long way as far as just figuring out what that is. And I'm really grateful to be in this chair and be working on this with DJ, and to have just such an important project right now. And it's not a project, it's a company. We're doing it, know, but I think if my younger self could see where I am right now, at Rady School of Management, just forging forward, she'd be pretty stoked. So
she must be very proud.
10-year younger self, huh? Yeah, I would say chill out. Would probably be the first thing I would say to my 10-year younger self. Not in the, whoa, like, calm down, what are you doing? 10 years ago, for context, I was sleeping on the floor at Kite Pharmaceuticals because I just finished a 18-and-a-half-hour day, and my next day was about to start in 3 hours. So when I say chill out, you need to make sure that you take care of yourself, and this applies to anyone who's listening too. You are not in your best space to do anything in life if you're not healthy and not in the right space. So when I entered into the industry, I came in with a fiery vengeance where I was upset at cancer, and I perceived what I was doing as like I've got my sword and board ready to like go to war against this disease. And while it was good for me to get that out 10 years ago and really grow a lot in terms of my experience, because it turns out there's a lot of magical things you can do, and 85% of your day is committed to working. But at the same time, there's a lot of just things about life that you have to grow, and you don't get those experiences just from working in a lab or working at a desk or something like that. You have to build those relationships and build those experiences, and that's what I've been doing for probably the better half of the last maybe 7.5 years once I came to that sudden realization. So yeah, chill out, DJ. That's
Make
what I'd
time
say.
for fun. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think having a balance between work and just enjoying life. You know,
Yeah.
it's really hard. It's a challenge for everyone, but yeah, taking care of yourself. I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree as well. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned so much about you guys as well as Cytodyme and the gene and cell therapy space. We really discussed a lot of topics today, and I wish Cytodyme and you guys all the best in
Thank
the
you.
future.